Precious cornerstone, sure foundation, you are faithful to the end. We are waiting on you, Jesus. We believe you're all to us. Only Son of God, sent from heaven, hope and mercy at the cross. You are everything, you're the promise. Jesus, you are all to us. Let the glory of your name be the passion of the church. Let the righteousness of God be a holy flame that burns. Let the saving love of Christ be the measure of our lives. We believe you're all to us. When this passing world is over, we will see you face to face, and forever we will worship Jesus. You are all to us. Let the glory of your name be the passion of the church. Let the righteousness of God be a holy flame that burns. Let the saving love of Christ be the measure of. We believe you're all to us. You're all to us. You're all to us. You're all to us. Jesus, you are all to us. Let the glory of your name be the passion of the church. Let the righteousness of God be a holy flame that burns. Let the saving love of Christ be the measure of our lives. We believe you're all to us. We believe you're all to us. Let no one caught in sin remain inside the lie of inward shame. We fix our We are one with him again. Come awake, come awake, come and rise up from the grave. Oh, death, where is your sting?
Where is your sting?
Oh, hell, where is your victory? Oh, church, come into the light. The glory of God has defeated the night. Singing, oh, death, where is your sting?
Where is your sting?
Oh, hell, where is your victory? Oh, church, come into the light. Our God is not dead. He's alive. He's alive. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling over death by death. Come awake, come awake, come and rise up from the grave. Christ is risen from the dead. We are one with him again. Come awake, come awake, come and rise up from the grave. Christ is risen from the dead. We are one with him again. Come awake, come awake, come and rise up from the grave.
My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly trust in Jesus' name. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly trust in Jesus' name. Christ alone, cornerstone, weak made strong in the Savior's love. Through the storm, He is Lord, Lord of all. When darkness seems to hide His face, I rest on His unchanging grace. In every high and stormy gale, my anchor holds within the veil. Christ alone, cornerstone, weak made strong in the Savior's love. Through the storm, He is Lord, Lord of all. When He shall come with trumpet sound, oh, may I then in Him be found, dressed in His righteousness alone, faultless stand before the throne, faultless stand before the throne. Christ alone, cornerstone, weak made strong in the Savior's love. Through the storm, He is Lord, Lord of all.
Redeemer lives. I know eternal life He gives. I know that my Redeemer lives, and my Redeemer lives. He wills that I should wholly be in word and thought, in deed. Then I His holy face may see when from this earth life free. I know that my Redeemer lives. I know eternal life He gives. I know that my Redeemer lives, that my Redeemer lives. I know that unto sinful men His saving grace is nigh. I know that He will come again to take me home on high. I know that my Redeemer lives. I know eternal life He gives. I know that my Redeemer lives, that my Redeemer lives. I know that over yonder stands a place prepared for me. A home, a house not made with hands, most wonderful to see. I know that my Redeemer lives. I know eternal life He gives. I know that my Redeemer lives, that my Redeemer lives.
I know it's weird that
I know it.
I grew up going to Minute Maid Park.
Yeah,
They were nationally retired.
yeah, BTO.
Yep. That's when I really liked the national standings.
So Carter and I, saw, we planned in 2003 our big New York trip to Yankee Stadium, and then to go up to upstate to Cooperstown, the whole thing. Just so happened, just random luck, that that we wound up at Yankee Stadium for Roger Clement's 300 win.
Oh, wow.
And 4,000 strikeout the same night. In fact, they were playing interleague, it was interleague play, they were playing Cardinals that night. And it was his third attempt, he had lost or had not won the first two. And one of my friends was there for the first one. I said, "Oh, you're so lucky you get to see history being made." Well, he didn't, because Cleveland didn't win. Didn't win the next game, and it just fell right for us to be there. So,
That's awesome.
yeah, it was. It was.
I lived in St. Louis for that Rangers.
Yeah.
Just the front.
Oh, really?
That was probably
Did you go?
no, my dad did though.
Okay. Tina had her dad's first cousin, hit for the Cardinals. Yeah, a long time ago. In fact, his first elite pitcher and his first save was for Bob Gibson. Yeah, places. He died early, I never met him. That's a big. Yeah.
Right.
My dad's a Congo representative up here.
From
Oh, my dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Six signatures back there.
Carter's still around somewhere.
Yeah, so when I asked him from everybody to my president, I hoped I was right too.
Yes.
So, do you win?
July
Do you know yet?
I don't know. It is.
Yeah, pretty good on the hardest thing in the world.
Yeah, we're super excited.
Yeah.
Just got married right there in May. So,
Okay.
There's schedule, so the purpose of that effort.
So I'll put it there. So you get maybe
we have a couple, but so far we like
We need them also a lot, and if we,
See, this is how bad. Yeah, we had one with that.
oh, we have.
apparently great grandfather on Allison's side or something.
Yeah.
Even now, she's just
Yeah.
and then our daughter's her granddaughter, Charlie. Charlie Kate.
Yep.
So what were your names?
I like Waylon. I never knew that. My middle name is James. I just like the name Mark.
So So Waylon, what's your last name?
We just didn't want to take him off my parents.
So he's
It's not often.
or Waylon James. So you all had good morning. How are you this morning? Good, how are you? All right. Last night actually was great. And so you all were here and I was here. You all are kind of one place.
That's really not too bad, is it?
Enjoy your walk. Good morning. Everybody rested? Or did you come here to get some sleep?
That's up to you.
Tina, would you take names? People that go to sleep.
When I'm
Crystal, C-R-Y.
You stayed awake the whole time last night. Almost.
second witness.
I have a really good solution for staying awake. So I have tried and tried and tried to drink coffee. I'm just not man enough to drink coffee, I think. But I can guzzle Diet Mountain Dews, and that's not advisable, but nevertheless. Well, it's good to see you. Hope you slept well last night. How's Chris?
Also,
You don't have to do the exercises by yourself today, do you?
no, not today.
It's good to have you. All right, so let's begin with you all helping me a little bit. So how did the best friend activity exercise go? Did you anybody come up with anything you hadn't thought of before that you're kind of excited about doing together that you can talk about? This is the participation part of the seminar.
Nothing new.
Nothing new?
We have a lot.
I tried the new bass boat, that didn't work.
You did? Ooh. So if she won't go, I'll go. So how difficult was it? Did you feel like coming up with things that you can do just for you all that you have in common is trickier than you might have thought? No? Yes?
It's easy to come up with stuff, but then it is like, well, when will we do this? When can we go find when?
Yeah, finding the time for it. And she doesn't have a clue yet, does she? Boy, is that getting ready to,
Exactly.
yeah.
Factoring that in, it's never gonna happen.
You know, I don't want to do what people did to us. When we were pregnant with Carter, our first one, people would come up to us and almost say spitefully, it felt like, boy, is your life getting ready to change. Boy, is your life getting ready to change. And I got to where I just wanted to shake people and say, I am ready for my life to change. We're looking forward to this. What do you think is wrong with that? So I didn't want to, I maybe did that a little bit. I'm sorry if I did. But it's a good change. But yeah, finding time. What else?
Over the years, we've tried a few things that didn't work. So you just have to keep, you just have to keep trying.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
And you can even compromise. You can say, well, half the day, let's do this that you really want to do, another half, but you're still together. You may not like what they're doing or what they suggested, but you're still together with them, and then you end up maybe liking it together as well. But
You know, and that's part of it. Part of it, in fact, we're going to talk first thing this morning about fulfilling each other's needs. And that's kind of a second tier of the best friend thing. Being interested in what they're interested in, as we talked about last night, and giving ourselves up for each other, that's obviously part of it. That's what best friends do. However, having that common piece that we both are interested in is just a really, really thick glue. It just really is. And I believe that most couples kind of drift away from that, and unless they work really hard to keep it in place, it just kind of doesn't happen, and we drift apart. Well, so let's get going with number 3 this morning, and I kind of have fun with this one. You have to look close. There's your bass boat picture. Happiest day of my life. And unfortunately, that sometimes is what we focus on more than what matters most. All right, so we want to talk this morning about fulfilling each other's needs. And this, to me, other than doing marriage God's way, is probably what I would consider the most important topic in the seminar, if people will do it. Now, it's one that fits more with some personality types than others. I realize that, and we'll talk about that as we go. However, purposefully working to fulfill each other's needs is very important. All right. Quentin, do you want to... kind of the gist of it. That's kind of funny to me. So, one of the things that makes fulfilling each other's needs challenging is our needs change. What we need as we grow older is very different. And how many of us were exactly like we were when we were dating or married? I talked about this briefly last night. And as we change, we become different people with different needs and different wants, different desires. Our needs have changed. Therefore, look closely at this. If my philosophy for having a great marriage is to change my spouse into what I want or need him to be at all phases of life, then it's probably going to be difficult and I'm going to be disappointed. Now, you may have to stop and think about that for a minute, but the typical mindset is, I want to find the right person. I want to find the right person who's right for me, who is what I want her or him to be, who likes what I like, who, it's all from my needs and my perspective. However, I can give myself to working on being for my spouse what he or she needs me to be. And if I do that, then things are completely different. And so we want to develop that. My dad, in the early years of my childhood, was a preacher. And I remember even as a small kid, him saying from the pulpit, marriage is more about being the right person than finding the right person. And I would hear him say that, and I would think, oh, that sounds good, okay. But at this point in life, I understand what he was saying. And what I want to show us this morning is that when you can get two people thinking like that, everybody both get what they need and what they want from each other. And that's exactly the way God's plan works. It is so much better when we do it God's way. And it is the difference between the average marriage that we see out there and the wow marriage, I believe, at least, in that the wow marriage is the one where you have two spouses who are completely other person focused and unselfish people. and they are looking to take care of each other. They are looking to make sure that the other one is content, is fulfilled, is happy. And when you see that couple that I asked you to think about as we began last night, the best marriage you know, if you'll look closely at them or think closely about them this morning, I guarantee you what you will see are two people who are very other person focused and centered. And two people who are very fulfilled in their relationship. Now, I want you to stop and think about that. Remember, it is more blessed to give than to receive. We're going to come back from that, to that. But this is where we're going. And I said last night we would talk a lot about respect. It is a matter of respect and appreciation. And I want to take you back to when you first started dating again and how we would do anything for them. We would do anything. Why? Because we were trying to impress them. We were trying to get them to like us or to love us. And we would do anything. I used to go to the grocery store with Tina. Why? Because I love the grocery store? Ooh, are you kidding me? No, but I loved being with her. I would do anything just to get to be with her. Didn't matter what we were doing. And I would even be on my best behavior in the grocery store. Why? Because I was trying to impress her. It mattered that much to me. We can show our best sides when we try. And we are talking about doing it God's way. Remember, we want to look first at what God says. And as my mother used to say as we were growing up, in the mom version, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. For this is the law and the prophets, Jesus said. And this is the verse that I keep referring to in Acts 20 and verse 35. And interestingly, it's nowhere recorded in Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, but Luke in the book of Acts refers to Jesus teaching it is more blessed to give than to receive. Now, familiar words, we've heard them, most of us, many times, but I want to put the concept before you, further trying to show us how we are much happier when we are other person focused instead of self-centered or self-focused. Watch this. At our place in life, we still look very forward, most of us at least, to Christmas. And we look forward to having the whole family together and getting around the Christmas tree and opening those presents. And I probably look as forward to that today than I have ever looked. But it has absolutely nothing to do with what my family got for me. It has everything to do with when Tina and I have found the perfect gifts for our grandchildren or our children. There is nothing better than watching them open those gifts and those smiles coming out on their face and them being so happy, right? That's what makes Christmas special, other than obviously being together. But I would far rather give someone the perfect gift than have someone give me the perfect gift based on the joy that I get out of both of those feelings. It is more blessed to give than to receive. Let me try a second way. How do we sleep better at night? Do we sleep better at night when we have spent the day doing for others, or when we have spent the day having others do for us? Now, there are times when it's important for others to do for us. There are times when we're in need. If we've got a hardship going on and others helping us, oh, that's soft in our heart. That's special. It's important. But I'm telling you, the day, at the end of the day, when we have spent the day doing something for others is a good feeling, isn't it? Yeah, it is. Why? Because Jesus obviously knew what he was talking about. It is more blessed to give than to receive. And if our marriage is made up of two people who are looking for what we can get instead of what we can give, then we're missing out on joy and fulfillment in marriage. Now, it's not always easy. Why? Because by nature, our first thought usually is, what can she do for me? What can he do for me? How can I benefit from this? But you know what the Christian life is? The Christian life is is largely God having created us with instincts, with desires, with feelings, and then Him saying, all right, discipline those, channel those, use them correctly. And that's largely what separates us from the animals. Because God said, you're a notch above. I want you to discipline those urges and use them appropriately. And when you do, not only will you be right with me, your life will be far better. Well, Ephesians 5:28, in the same way, husbands, we especially are to be unselfish, loving our wives, even as our own bodies. In Ephesians 5:25, if that's not, verse 28 is not a high enough level, as Christ loved the church and gave Himself for her. Now, I want to go to the verse we usually miss. We usually go right straight to husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. Wives, submit yourselves unto your husbands as unto the Lord, to establish that leadership role in marriage. But we miss verse 21 in our teaching over and over again. Verse 21 is exactly what this whole session is about when it says, submit yourselves one to another. Submit yourselves one to another. Husbands, we are to submit to our wives. It's not only a one-way street where wives submit to the husbands. Now, listen to me well. I'm not taking away from the teaching in Ephesians 5, where we as men are to be heads of our households. But I suggest to you that is a responsibility, not a privilege. I think I have a responsibility for my family, bringing my children up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord, doing everything I can to help Tina get to heaven. And she is to look to me, but I'll also suggest she has a role of helping me get to heaven. And especially when it comes to my desires or her desires, what I need versus what she needs, what matters to me versus what matters to her, I am to give myself up for her. And she is to give herself up for me. And when we both do that, we both are very fulfilled husband and wife. Now, I want you to think about it, because that goes against the nature that God gave us. And we have to work on that, and we have to purposefully commit to that. And that's what we're doing this morning. Troubled marriages, and I see them every day in the counseling room, look like this. Those that result in scorekeeping. Those who have the attitude, I will if you will. Or, what can you do for me? Or, what are you not doing for me? I see these every day. And especially when it gets to that place where baggage has built up, frustration and resentment have built up, then it is easy for those little things to become big, and two people sit back and watch the other one under a microscope so that they can pick them to death for what they're doing wrong. And when marriages get in trouble, that's the way they're living. That's just the way it is. Now, I want to say this. Fulfilling your spouse's needs can gain back his or her love. One of the most difficult things for me is when somebody calls and says, I'm having trouble in my marriage, it's not going well, I can't get my husband to come. Sometimes I can't get my wife to come to counseling. but will you see me? And I go, oh. And I always say yes. I never tell people no. There are situations that I'll refer quickly, feeling that I don't have the ability to handle certain things or others do better. However, I hate that one spouse coming in for marriage counseling, because how do you help a troubled marriage by dealing with one person? The answer, at least where I usually go, is here. And what I usually tell the one who is trying while living with the one even who may not be trying very hard is, it's hard not to treat somebody like a queen when she's treating him like a king. If you return good for evil so long, it's only a matter of time, usually, before that starts making a dent and it starts making a difference. When somebody gives themselves up for us, it's hard not to notice. And so I put this slide in here at this point to say it's not unusual in a seminar like this for there to be marriages where one is trying harder than the other. One wants the intimate relationship, the fulfilled marriage, the wow marriage, way more than the other one. And if you're sitting there right now feeling like I'm trying so hard, but he or she doesn't seem to be trying, then what I will suggest to you is your best option, the best bet here is for you to give yourself up to take care of their needs and do it as long as you can and see if eventually there's not reciprocation. Now, that's way easier for me to stand here and say, I get that. It's hard to continue to return good for evil over and over and over again when you're not getting anything in return. But remember, Jesus said that we are to do that because scribes and the Pharisees are the ones who keep score and do good only to those who do good to them. Often it is more important to one spouse. In fact, I'll go ahead. When both are committed to meeting the needs of one another, both love each other for whom they are and what they do out of love for the other, it is self-perpetuating and feeds itself. The challenge is to get it started, and that's simply a matter of committing to being strategic and focusing on taking care of each other's needs. Now, I want to come back to this just as a reminder. Is it possible? Sure it is. Why? It's what we did when we dated. Was it, what can he or she do for me? Or was it, what can I do to most impress them and make them happy? It was B, not A. And so we can do that. And what was the easier mindset to have? What was the most fulfilling? It is more blessed to give than to receive. Now, in a few minutes, after I go through what I call, or what Tina and I call the needs list process, our second exercise is for you all to go and work together on developing a needs list. Now, some of you are going, oh great, I've got to talk mushy stuff. Please, yeah, it'll be worth it. You'll be glad you did. I think, trust me, I hope. But let's talk about how this works. What is this tool that we call needs list, and how does it work? It works like this. And in fact, I'll describe it and then I'll go through these and show you kind of how I use it and how you all can then in turn use it as we do our second exercise. There are very few couples that come through my counseling room that we don't do a needs list for. Needs lists are tricky. And in fact, the trickiest person to put together a needs list are young mothers. And as Tina and I work with young mothers, and maybe in the 8 weeks for 8 couples thing that we do, we will ask those young mothers to come up with 3 to 5 things that they need from their spouse. And it's amazing how the vast majority of time they will look at us and say, I don't know. And the reason for that is they have become such givers and such providers and such take care of others' needs that they kind of lose themselves other than being a mother who takes care of everybody.
And even the thought of what do I need from somebody else other than time becomes very difficult. Why? Because maternal instinct has kicked in. They have so given themselves up for everybody else, even to stop and think about what they need from their husband almost feels like a foreign thought, doesn't it, Tina? Yeah, all the time. We have young mothers say, I don't know. So couple will be in the counseling room, and I will say, all right, we're going to do a needs list today. We're going to work on things that you all need from each other. And I want you to think of the top 3 or 4, maybe 5 things that you need from each other. We used to do 5, but over time, I decided, quite frankly, that's hard to focus on 5 big things at once. And so we brought it down to 3 or 4. And in that needs list discussion that I'll have with couples, I will turn to him or her, and usually I'll ask who wants to go first, and I'll say, what do you most need from her? Or what do you most need from him? Needs list items, and we'll see this, I'll run through the slides, but just let me keep running with it. Needs list items have to be behavioral, meaning they have to be something your spouse can do. They cannot be thoughts or feelings, because we can't always change our thoughts and feelings just simply by trying harder. I'll give you an example. I deal every week with couples where one of them has had an inappropriate relationship. And the one who has had the relationship, after they have been in counseling for weeks and sometimes months, will say to me, I just need her or I just need him to trust me. And I have to explain, that's not something that happens just because he or she tries harder. And sometimes I will have a spouse say, I need her to not be so angry with me. Well, you know, we can work on our attitudes and we can work on our mindset, but anger is not something we can just push a button and turn off. Or what about this one? I just need her or I just need him to forgive me. Forgiveness is tricky. And in fact, let me run with this one for a minute because I won't do it anywhere else, I think. Over and over again, and this is important, over and over again in the counseling room, I'll have couples, especially when there has been an inappropriate relationship, usually somewhere between 2 and 3 months, where the one who did not have the relationship will come to me, sometimes by himself or herself, and will say to me, I don't know why I can't forgive him or I can't forgive her. Why can I not forgive? I've asked God to help me to forgive, but I'm just still so mad. And I chuckle a little inside because I go, here we go again. Heard that question so many times. I understand. And then I begin the process of explaining that forgiveness, listen to this, and this applies in a lot of different ways, not only when there's an inappropriate relationship. Forgiveness is way more what we do than how we feel. It's way more what we do than how we feel. Why? If I walk behind one of my calves as I'm vaccinated and it kicks me in the shin, it's going to be a while before I walk behind another calf. How long is it going to be before I forget that? Now, I may do a better job of using the squeeze chute. I may do a better job of protecting myself, but I'm still going to be a little gun shy as I walk behind that calf. Why? I don't forget easy. Now, does that mean I'm beating on the calf? I may have at first. But that's not the way that works. When something happens to us, we can't just push a button and change the God-given feelings that we have about that situation. And usually what I'll tell to that spouse who says, why can't I forgive them? I'll say, oh, you are here trying to make your marriage work. You are doing everything you can to hold on to your family, to put it back together. That is forgiveness. Can you automatically get over how bad it hurts? No, but don't beat yourself up over it. Now, remind yourself of that. If something has happened and you've got hurt feelings and you're beating yourself up because it still hurts, you keep doing the right things and your feelings eventually will take care of themselves. Back to the needs list. So I'll ask him, what do you most need from her? And he will say, I need this. And I sit there with a legal pad and I write down need number 1 after I've listened and I think I have exactly what the need is. And then I'll turn to her and I'll say, so in your own words, what is that need? And she will say, well, I feel like that you're saying to me you need me to do this and you want me to do this and it's important to you. And he may go, that's not exactly it. What I'm really saying is, and she'll go, okay, so you're saying, and he'll go, yeah, that's it. And I'll write it down and look at what's happening in that situation. They are communicating, they are understanding, they're not doing it out of frustration or resentment. Why? Partly because they got a third person in the room and they're on their best behavior. But the way we usually communicate our needs is how? It's when we get so frustrated and resentful that we finally blow up and say things like, you never, why don't you? And it throws our spouse into defense mode. And how much good does that do? What are we doing? We're grabbing hands full of mud and we're throwing it at each other. And she is grabbing hands full of mud and slinging it back. But in this situation, we are purposefully, carefully saying, this is important to me. It's a big deal to me. I want to make sure I understand. Is this what you're saying? And it works. Now, after we have gone through that for both couples, then I'll tell them, all right, take these. Your job is to go home and for the next couple of weeks, you look at this list every day. And you wake up in the morning and you look at that, or on your way to work, you look at that and you go, what can I do today that will help fulfill her needs? And I tell those couples, you do this whether she or he does anything on his or her list for you at all. If they do nothing, you can do it for 2 weeks. You give yourself up for them. And the reason that you do that is because if you don't do that, you're slipping back into the way everybody else does it, which is I will if you will. And if you want to see a marriage take off, you give me 2 people who are both willing to unconditionally give themselves up for each other. And I'll tell you almost without exception, if I get 2 people in a marriage, even when the baggage is high, who are willing to go home and give themselves up for each other for 2 weeks, when they come back in 2 weeks, they almost always tell me it's the best 2 weeks we've had in years. Why? Because it brings us right back to doing it God's way. It is more blessed to give than to receive. It is. Now, let me go through these, and some of these I can go through pretty quickly. After spending time writing, he discusses his or her needs, and you all are going to have the opportunity in just a few minutes to do it. And after a couple of days, then we come back. Now, this is the part I didn't tell you about. When a couple comes back a couple of weeks later, I'll say, how's it go? We had a really good 2 weeks. All right, and I have told them, bring your needs list back with you. And then we do the grading. Now, I told you some of you would go along with this more than others. Mike and I understand institutional research and doing academic assessment, and that was my job for many years. And so you just quantify everything. You just do. And when you're that kind of personality type, it's easy. If you're not that kind of personality type, you hate these kinds of exercises. But it's pretty simple. Here's the way it works. I'll ask husband to read his wife's first need, and then I will ask her on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being low and 5 being high, how well did he do? And she may go, oh, I'll give him a 4. And I'll go, oh, good. What did he do well? And she'll say, well, I noticed when you did this, and I loved it the day that you came in and did this or brought me this. I loved when you told me to go and let me take the kids, and then I will ask her, so what could he have done to have made that a 5? And she will say something like, you know, on Wednesday when we were trying to get ready to go to church, I really needed help, and you were in there watching ESPN, and I just really needed you to help me. And he goes, oh, wow, I didn't even realize that was going on. And what's happening? They're talking, they're communicating, they're understanding, they're not slinging mud. Why? Because they're trying to understand each other better instead of trying to defend themselves. It's not an angry moment. It's not a frustration moment. It's a moment where we're talking and learning each other and how to fulfill each other better. Now, I encourage you, when you do your needs list today, to commit as you go home today or tonight to coming back in a couple of weeks and grading each other on it. Now, a lot of people won't do it. I get it. It's kind of academic in nature. But what I will tell you is the grading part is more important than the first part, where you identify your needs. When you identify your needs, they won't always surprise the other one, but being able to have that feedback and communication is where we really drill down and get deep into looking at what the other one needs from us. And I encourage you to redo needs list. Continue to redo your needs list. Why? Well, a good way to do this is if you feel yourselves drifting apart and you feel yourselves getting back into the consumed in life way of living, one of you be big enough to say, I think it's time for us to redo our needs list. And I think what you will find is if you'll redo your needs list, you'll find yourselves being closer and pulling yourselves right back. Now, you're already thinking about what you're going to put down on your needs list. Tina and I don't want to tell you what is on your needs list, but after doing this hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, there's some that emerge way more than others. And so let me give you some ideas of what we usually or often see. First of all, they have to be behavioral, cannot be feelings or emotions. If you're having trouble coming up with what you need from him or her, then think of it as a wish list. Oh, I wish he would, or oh, I wish she would, or think of it as that would make me go, wow, that was nice if he or she were to have done something. Now, what are the challenges? What keeps some couples from doing needs lists? First one is, oftentimes we'll sit there and think, I already know what she needs. I already know what he needs. I don't need her to tell me. Yeah, right. Well, let's go on. Second challenge I've talked about, knowing what my own needs are. The third one is probably bigger than the first two. The inability to sit down and roll up my sleeves and be that open and real with my spouse. And especially if there's frustration and resentment, especially if things are not real good, it's hard to have these open conversations. This one is big, assuming that if it is my need, it is also his or her need. You know how ridiculous that is? That is so ridiculous, and the way we most exhibit this when we are not willing to discuss things is in the physical relationship. One of the most difficult things to talk about in marriage is the sexual relationship. It just makes us uncomfortable. But you know what happens when we don't talk about what our physical needs are to each other? We do for the other one what we want them to do for us. Now, you don't have to be married very long to know males and females are different. They want things differently. They want to be touched differently. Their physical needs are very different. But in the marriage relationship, by the way, some of you just woke up. Those of you who were starting to... Can he talk about that in the church building? Well, I do quite a bit. Yeah, absolutely. We better, right? But what happens throughout all parts of the marriage relationship, if we don't talk and understand each other, then we assume that the other one needs what we need. And those needs are very different. Another challenge, being too manly or insensitive to talk about it. I'm not going to go back there in the church building and talk about this. Okay, but you sure are missing out. Another challenge, thinking he or she shouldn't have that need. Ooh, I could talk about that for a while. That's ridiculous. Why would you? Don't do that. Taking the time to do it. Or sometimes having been married so long that we're not inclined to make any changes or do anything different. Think of it as a wish list. And so here are some examples. Tina and I always encourage couples to put on their needs list spiritual encouragement. Why? Because if we are going to do marriage and life God's way, then we need help from our spouse to do that. Whether he or she is the true spiritual leader in the family, we still need spiritual encouragement. That can be something very simple as driving down the road and seeing a beautiful sky and saying, wow, look at what God gave us today. It can be something very simple as an email or a text saying, I just told God thank you. Thank him for you. I thank God for you. It can be something as simple as sharing a thought that you saw on a church sign as you drive down the road, or reminding one another of something spiritual in nature. And we'll talk more about that later in the day. Another example of her needs, oftentimes she will say, I just need time to talk. There was a couple several years ago that came to me, and the first day they came, she said, you are our last hope. We have decided that if you can't help us to do better, we are going to divorce. This was a Christian family, a Christian couple. They had been Christians, good people, but their marriage was not good. And I thought, oh, no pressure here, right? Thank you for saying that. And so we talked that first session, and in the second or third session, we started working on a needs list. And so I asked who wants to go first, and she looked at him and she said, you go first. And so he started making his list of 5 things. And we spent an hour talking about his 5 things and making sure she understood, and I wrote them down. And then we got to her. And I said, so what's your first one? And she said, I only have one. And I thought, okay, one of those, yeah, we'll pull more out. But what is it? You know what she said? She said, she looked at him and she said, I just need you to look at me when I'm talking to you. And I thought, and you're about to get a divorce over this? Well, as that unfolded, what came to be true was she had some health issues. She was a stay-at-home wife, and he was a school teacher. And so at the end of the school day, he would get things wrapped up at school, and he would come home, and he would get a glass of tea, and he would sit down in his chair and turn on ESPN. She had been waiting all day for adult companionship, adult communication. He was so tired of talking and wrestling with kids that he needed to get home and have his downtime. She would try to talk. He would not need that and turn her off, and she felt like he did not love her and pay attention to her. But when she said, all I need from you is to look at me when I talk to you, he went, really? That's easy. And so they left, came back in a week, actually, as I remember, and they were like 2 junior high kids with 4 brand new puppy dogs each. Why? Because they finally stopped to say, this is important to me. And I'll tell you, I hear more and more and more than you would believe, wives say, I need you to listen. I need to know that what I have to say is important. Oftentimes she will say, I need help around the house. Oftentimes she will say, oh, if you'll just rub my back. I don't know, I can't tell you how many of you all just looked at each other. She often will say, I need verbalized appreciation and praise. She will say, I need help with the children. I need you to tell me that you love me. Fighting insecurity is big. Pay attention to me when I talk. Ask me out. I need some alone time. Will you please take the kids? Give me some time just to regroup. She will say, other than back rubs, non-sexual affection. And oftentimes, not as often on her needs list, will be sexual affection. By the way, let me go ahead and run with that one for a minute while we're here. Sex for men and sex for women are two very different things, generally, not always. But sex for women is a feeling of needing to be needed, needing to be close, needing to feel special. It's far more a physical desire and physical fulfillment. It's just the way God made us. And again, if we take care of each other's needs based on what our own needs are, then our spouse is probably not going to be fulfilled because those needs feel very differently. His needs, spiritual encouragement, we encourage. Almost always, men will say, I need more physical and sexual attention. Men want to feel important. They want to feel like they are their wife's king. And if they come home talking about something they did well at work, and if they do that often, or if they say, did you notice? Or I did this and you didn't notice, it's a big red flag being waved there. He's telling you, or she's telling you, works the same way for both. They are telling you, it's important to me for you to show me that you acknowledge my strengths and appreciate me for them. Now, that has to do with personality types. We'll talk more about that. He often will need her to be interested in what he's interested in. Sometimes alone time for hobbies, sometimes special meals. One of my favorite stories is I was doing some of these lessons many years ago in southwestern Tennessee, and there was this man in his upper 80s who came to me. In fact, I did some of them Sunday afternoon. He came back to a session Sunday night, and he called me preacher. He said, preacher, that needs less thing works. And I said, it does? Tell me about it. And he said, you know what I got this afternoon? And I thought, ooh, this may be good. Wonder what he's getting ready to say. And he said, I got a pie. She made my favorite pie. And I said, good for her. I told you it would work. So here's the watered down version. If you're unwilling on an ongoing basis, I want you to try it one time at least today. But if you're unwilling to go through the whole process that I've described, then ask each other, what do I need to work on that's important to you? Or what could I do that would make you go, wow, that was very nice. Now, remember where we started last night with my buddy Rich running the marathon. And I told you, if you want a wow marriage, you're not going to get it by not trying and not working and not doing the extras. You have an example today to do the extras. And so in your packet, you have an exercise too that is a needs list. So I want to encourage you, Tina.
Just want to say a couple things.
Yeah, sure.
One thing, like, you do need to be very specific when you write things down. You know, if one of the things is alone time or time to have a date, if you're not specific, it won't happen. And just like you have a doctor's appointment and a dentist appointment, because that's important for your health, you have to get the calendar out and say, okay, you know, in 2 Saturday nights, we're gonna go out to eat, or, I'm gonna go out with friends a certain night once a month. Like, you have to be very specific, I think, or you'll just put it off and put it off, because, you know, especially as women, we tend to put us at the bottom of the list. and not take care of our needs. Another thing is, sometimes it's role reversal, because he could write a dissertation with his top 3 or 5 things. Like, he could write out what he needed and be very specific, but I would be like short to the point, like maybe a sentence for my needs. And it was hard for me to really express myself on what I needed, and I didn't even know what I needed. And you can do that even not as a young mother. You know, to me, it's still hard to know as a woman, but it may be as a man too, to know what you want. But it gets easier, and it gets easier to talk to your spouse, because sometimes it's hard just to express yourself with your spouse what you really need and how to put it in words where they understand. And so it was very hard for me when we first started doing it, but I promise it gets easier to do.
So what questions do you have? Thank you. Yep, good stuff. Questions? You think you got it? Anybody unwilling to do it, raise your hand. Well, that's not fair, is it? All right, so it is 5 till, I want to get, and I'm behind because I didn't watch the clock well enough, but I can speed up a little bit and make some time up. So let's take 15 minutes for you to work on your needs list, and you can start the process, and obviously work on it more as you get home, but I hope you will start. And then, in fact, take a quick break. Let's try to get going again. In fact, there are things in the break room, I guess, right, again. So grab something. Can they bring them in here? Is that okay? So grab something, bring it in here, and we'll try to get going again at 10:15.
Tell them they're not sharing this. I don't want you to think that you have to come in and tell anything.
No, I'm not going to grade them. So what else?
Could I say something maybe that happened for everybody, all the couples, but we have some particular.
She's scaring you to death right now, isn't she?
Yes,
Go
I
ahead,
know.
Catherine.
But I think that happens. Okay, when about the needs, he always tell me, oh, you are needing always something. You are not happy when you get some things. You get those things and you want more. Always I am needing something.
Is he right? Just curious.
Yes.
Okay.
It's right. For that reason in my question, I say, yes, it's right what he said, but if I needed it, I don't know. And sometimes I think, okay, is his mistake or is my mistake? Can you explain me first?
Oh, I can't. It's always his mistake.
Oh, don't say that.
No, I'm kidding. If you all are anywhere close to normal, it is sometimes him and sometimes you.
Yes, that is true.
Probably a little more him, but no, I'm kidding.
Yes. Yes, because we like everything. Sometimes I say, I am a woman, sorry.
So let me say this. Let me use your question. Be careful not to think of a needs list as things that you need. All right? Don't think of it as things that you need.
When do we share these with our spouse? After today, or when, like, if we don't get down to?
Take a few minutes, write them down, then change papers with each other and read them and ask for clarification and ask, all right, I think you're saying you need this, and talk about them. Good question. Thank you for asking. What else? Anything else? All right, so we're going to start back at 20 after. All right, let's go.
Quality time.
All that matters.
Still laughing, it's not. Well, it's great to have her, his parents in town.
You know, when you started the story, I was saying you're going the other direction. You know,
Your sister.
somebody said something, he said, we'll talk about that. So that's neat.
How's it going?
Yeah, figured out.
Oh, no, we've been trying this for 30-something years.
Well, keep trying.
One of these days I'll figure out and I'll write a book and I'll retire.
Yeah.
I'm planting the dogs.
Send me a copy when you
Those
get
dogs and tricks.
Just the way it is.
Yeah.
But now them up there too. We'll see if they're still there. Yeah. What's on a swell? We get her a step stool. Yeah, thanks for setting all the online stuff.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Never has, never will. Give you some pictures.
No, we didn't. I usually get not even 7, 5, 7.
Did you get him straightened out?
Yes, yes.
No.
Ah, yes. Yes.
Straightened out. Did you get him right in line? Does that work?
I just did it. Yes, he just really was like, okay, I did it. Was like, please don't take that shot.
But I
I do have that feeling that I really know what he's
Oh, yeah, sure.
But yeah, it's just.
But then she'll write something down that surprises you, and go, oh, I didn't realize that was such a big deal. Torturing you for what?
So she's learning a new painting technique, and they show
A torch. Yeah, okay.
she's like, oh, give me that torch, and I don't think that's safe.
So the thing is, if I put a match with the acrylic paint like this, and many times I just burn the match once over and over again, I know that it's not dangerous. And I didn't accident. Okay. Yes, when you say time.
Okay.
I'm curious what you think about the five love languages. Does that have anything to do with
No,
this,
you
or
could
do you
ask that.
use that? Because we've read that book. I don't know. I'll buy it. Does that have that whole value, you think? Or,
I don't like that. But it's completely personality. My son loves that.
really?
And,
You talking about the Enneagram?
no, love language.
The five love languages?
Yeah, you know, all of that does a good job in helping us to do a better job of understanding each other.
I didn't see it intertwined kind of.
Yeah.
But like, I need all of them. I just say I just give some my lowest, but.
So, have you done like Myers-Briggs personality indicator?
In high school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you remember how they have quadrants? You know, you can be strong in a quadrant, or you can be weak and kind of down here.
Yeah.
You know, that's accurate. You know, you're probably in the middle somewhere.
Yeah.
Which is better.
Okay, just curious.
Yeah.
Not that he knows what it is, children just know what love language is. I'm like, well, I'm gonna all buy it.
Feel crazy about labeling and categorizing because there are different levels within labels and categories, but when you're labeled or categorized, none of those degrees, you know, really come into play. So,
I'm just curious what you do and if you're good.
people ask me that. Yeah, but if it works for you, go with it. So did you read it?
Yeah.
Wow. So was it good? So be real with me. Did you like it or did it?
Maybe.
Yeah. Congratulations.
All right, are we ready? All right, Quentin, I'm going to try to go through two before a break. All right, so when we get through with this one, we'll move right into the next one. And then we'll take a break between that one and the last one before lunch. However, if you need, if you have a real strong urge for a cookie, go get one. Or bathroom break or whatever, just so we can kind of stay on task.
You may want to ask if they had any questions real quickly.
Yeah.
before-
So questions from trying to work on needs list?
You put like 13.
Yeah,
What'd you say, 13?
I was gonna ask for another sheet too.
Yeah, another sheet. Yeah, you all are loosening up some, I'm glad.
I'll ask, what is your recommendation for when you should redo your list? Is it some major event in your life, like your first child, or?
So, I try to not become too personal, and I have to work hard at it because what I know is what we have learned together with us and others. But I will be kind of personal with you in answering that question. So Tina and I did our first needs list in 2005. And for months and months, we would redo them every Sunday night. And usually when we redid them, they would pretty well stay the same, but we might have something new that would come up and we would take one off and put a new one on. Tina often would say, I've trained you so well, I don't need this on your needs list anymore because you're just doing it. And you do kind of learn to do things habitually and then replace them with things that kind of come up. So after several months, we quit doing them every Sunday night. And I'm not saying this at all in a way to say, look at us. But the answer to your question is from 2005 until whatever today is, February the 5th, we have never gone without a needs list. We still, she can tell you exactly where my needs list is at home, and I can tell you where hers is. Now, we haven't redone them in several months. And the way we use them now is when we feel life pulling us apart because we just don't have time for each other, or we don't make time, or we feel like we're kind of so consumed with everything that's taking us in different directions, one of us will say, I think it's time for us to redo our needs list. Because when we redo our needs list, the next weeks are better than they have been because it just pulls us right back together. You want to help? You want to add to that?
No, that's true.
It is true. So it's kind of the safety net for us, but and I won't ask Tina in front of y'all when's the last time she's looked at my needs list. If she won't ask me when's the last time I looked at hers, but they're there, and when we start feeling neglected or distant, we'll redo them, and it pulls us right back. It just works for us. Other questions?
Yeah, it's a little bit off the subject, but I'm just kind of curious. I've heard it said where sometimes people get married to their spouse because they think they love them for who they are, but they think the rough edges they can change over time. And but also, is that the right way to go? I mean, you marry someone because for who they are, not because of what you think that you can change them to become, right?
I see an awful lot of couples who married for the wrong reason, who think they can change each other or they'll change over time. And the biggest example there is when couples marry and think, well, they'll get their act together spiritually later, and especially, when couples will think, well, yeah, I haven't been what I ought to be, and he or she hasn't been what they ought to be, but down the road, we both want to please God and be the Christian people we ought to be. However, the roads in the wrong direction usually keep going and going and going until they get in trouble, and then all of a sudden one of them wants it and the other one doesn't, and so I don't know if I'm even going where you want me to or not, but.
Well, I mean, it's kind of a joke in our society from what you just said, that the women joke about changing their husbands, that type of thing. In a way, I find that kind of, there may be
Well, yeah, and what I will share with you is this. In fact, met Wednesday night, my last appointment Wednesday night before we left to come here was a couple. I had met with him once by himself. She came with him. Usually it's the other way around. And so for an hour and a half, I sat there and listened to him tell me what was wrong with her and her tell me what was wrong with him. That's usually what they do the first time they come. And at the end, I said, all right, this is what I need to be able to tell you. If each of you is coming for me to change the other one, this will never work. Because you and I can't change him, only he can change him. And if he's coming wanting me to change you, I can't change you. The only way that I can help you both is if you come to me with the attitude, how can you help me to be a better spouse, better wife, or better husband? And if I can get both of you to go, I need you to help me work on me, and quite frankly, you hope that I can help him work on him, but his attitude is not to fix you, it's to help him to do better. When I can get two people that realize we've got missing tools in the tool bag, and I need you to help me with my missing tools, then that couple's going to make it. They're going to be fine. And the couple where the baggage is built up so high that I can't get their focus to be on what the other one's off of what the other one's doing wrong. Ugh. You know, if we don't get past that point, and that doesn't mean that there aren't things each other needs to work on, but you can't fix him and he can't fix her. So other questions, and I'll try think of questions that you might have, and especially at the end today, or even as we go. I'll keep talking, but if you have a question, raise your hand and just interrupt me. I'm fine with that. All right, so let's talk about this one: honesty, trust, openness, and transparency. I said it last night, I'll say it again today. We cannot have good relationships with anybody without complete honesty, trust, openness. Hebrews 13 verse 4, marriage should be honored by all, the marriage bed kept pure, for God will judge the adulterer and all the sexually immoral. Marriage is an honorable relationship. It should be treated honorably, and honesty is a part of that. This one is the one that's more difficult for a lot of people. Matthew 5, the Sermon on the Mount, verse 37, let your yea be yea and your nay be nay. And I usually, that's the old King James Version, I usually paraphrase that by saying, let your no be no and your yes be yes. Mean what you say what you mean, and nothing more. Now this is such a personality type thing, because some people are engineers and accountants and architects by nature. They are precise, everything is black and white, and it's easy for them to be totally and completely accurate. However, as we'll talk later, for some of us, how much did you spend at the grocery store? $100. And you look on the receipt and it's $127.38, and you go, I thought you said it was $100. It is. You see what I'm saying? By nature, we view things differently. We see things differently. What are you laughing about so big, Catherine? Guilty as charged. Did she do that? Is that okay? I got it.
Because I say always, it's just $2, but it's 2.99.
Exactly. Yeah, I just need you to help me do this. That's why you're on the front row, isn't it? Why should marriage be easier for Christians? Because we are taught to be accurate, honest, and this is why the relationship with God needs to be first. It's why we need to be careful that we mean what we say and say what we mean. And when marriage has the added burden when all communication has to be filtered and interpreted due to a lack of accuracy or trust, then we got problems. We've got trust issues. And I want you to think about it before I go on, and I'm trying to make up some time, but I don't want to do it so quickly that this doesn't sink in. Probably all of us know what it's like to have conversations with each other where we ask a question, we get an answer, and then we start kind of reading in between the lines. Or we start thinking, well, is there a reason why he said that the way he did? We wonder what the spin is. We wonder, oh boy, that's burdensome. It's awful. Why? Because we don't have total trust and total commitment to accuracy and honesty. And part of the honesty and transparency part of marriage is how important it is for us to have our lives as open books. Open books. Very little should be kept from each other's spouse. I remember Tina and I were doing 8 weeks with 8 couples many years ago at one of the churches in Columbia on Wednesday nights. And I remember there was a couple, he came up to me afterwards and he said, because of my business, I deal with confidential information and I can't share that with her. Is that okay? And I said, of course that's okay. I'm not saying you can't have confidential information. I don't run home and tell Tina everything about everyone I counsel with. And in fact, unless she is working with me, which she sometimes does with a couple or with an individual, I don't go home and tell things that I don't need to tell outside the counseling room. And she doesn't expect that, and that's fine. That's not what I'm talking about. It's when we are doing things for the purpose of keeping it from each other because we don't want them to know for one reason or another. And being willing to be transparent and not resisting transparency speeds up the rebuilding process. I'll give you an example of this one. When a couple has gone through a breach of trust, and that can happen in a lot of different ways, but especially if it involves somebody else, I tell the couple that being open books is an absolute requirement. And if he has a passcode on his phone, he needs to give her the passcode. If she is having a hard time believing that he is where he says he is, then he needs to find a friend on his phone where she can know. Now, you may think, ooh, that sounds controlling. Well, that's not something that healthy couples ought to have to do. But they're not a healthy couple. They are rebuilding. And what happens if in a situation where a wife had an inappropriate relationship and the husband finds out about it and they are in the process of rebuilding, and I tell her, look, you've got to be willing to share your phone at any time. You've got to be willing to let your life be an open book. And they go along several weeks and they're doing well with that. But after a while, she kind of feels like she's being called into the principal's office when he wants to see who she's texting. And the problem in that situation is she knows what he can't know. And even if she tells him, I'm not texting anybody, I'm not supposed to, I'm not doing anything that I'm not supposed to, he can't believe that yet because trust is not rebuilt that easily. Just doesn't happen that quickly. And so he says, look, I need to see your phone. I just had a trigger today and I had a thought that worries me. Here's where she is. She is at the place where I haven't done anything wrong. I'm trying so hard to be loyal and committed to you. I want you to pat me on the back for being good. But when you ask me to see my phone, you're accusing me and blaming me of doing something I haven't done. Now, that wouldn't feel very good to her. But what happens is, because his trust in her is not back yet and won't be for a long time, If she says, I'm getting tired of you accusing me, no, you can't see my phone, or I have changed the passcode, his brain is going to go one place, and that is, why are you hiding things from me? And in that situation, and we'll come to this later, but I'll go ahead while I'm on this roll. In that situation, rebuilding trust involves making the unknown known. Share whatever you need to make sure that the other person knows what they can't know by you simply telling them. It becomes a providing evidence thing. And at any point, if I start withholding information when my spouse doesn't trust me, it makes the trust thing worse. Makes the trust thing worse. Keeping things from my spouse tears down oneness. And remember, that path to coexistence and undoing that is what we're trying to do. Financial trust is a very important part of this, sometimes extremely difficult. It's especially true when one of the spouses is the one who we used to say controls the checkbook or pays the bills. And it's so very easy for that to get out of whack. And in fact, when you've got a couple where one is financial, one is business-minded, one understands investments and budgets, and the other one doesn't, then the one who controls the account is making decisions, and if the two are not working together, then decisions are made that later on will come back to haunt. And I'll give an example. If I decide that it's time to buy a new hay rake, I may take some of my farm funds and I may sell some cows, and in order to keep from borrowing money for a hay rake, I may kind of get our checkbook a little low, because I'd a whole lot rather get it a little tight and we can live that way for a couple of weeks until it builds back up. And so I go and buy a $6,500 Kuhn 10-wheel V-rake. And I won't do that without asking Tina, and she'll say, are we okay? And I'll go, yeah, sure, it'll be fine, we're good, we're going to do it this way. And so what happens if a week later she comes up and she sees a dress that she just has to have? And Tina is the tightwad in the family, she doesn't spend money, so this whole illustration is in a lot of ways not about us anyway. But what if she finds that dress that she just has to have, and she comes to me, the one who controls the checking account, and she says, oh, I really want to buy this dress, is it okay? And because I have made decisions and am willing for things to be tight a couple of weeks, what happens if I say, honey, now is just not a very good time? What's the first question that's going to come out of her mouth? You mean to tell me you just spent $6,500 on a hay rake and I can't spend $100 on a dress? Is she going to say that? Yeah, why? Well, because if we haven't done a good job of communicating and talking about the situation and agreeing on it, and if I'm being the financial finagler and she's content with me just taking it and doing it, then she's going to feel like I'm being unfair to her, financial trust is gone, and oh, how important it is, especially in those situations where one tends to be the one responsible for the other, that there's communication and understanding. And sometimes that is painful. Finances, how much did you spend at the grocery store, Catherine? Well, you show him the receipt and you say, it was this amount to the penny. Because if you don't, he's going to roll his eyes and he's going to say, yeah, I bet it was $50 more than that, right? Yeah, absolutely. All of this matters.
And then he said, I don't want to go out more with you in that case. And then, no, please.
Yeah, he may be better off going to the store with you. So, especially when you got that situation where one controls the finances, work hard to talk about it so that there is an understanding, and create rules if needed. If you one of you goes out and spends something to the point that it frustrates the other, stop and sit down and say, all right, what's our limit? Can we spend up to X amount without having to get permission? I was working with a couple years ago who were in their 60s and were struggling in several ways. And one of them was a tightwad and the other was not. And they had some financial issues. And so I asked them this question. I said, how much do you think you ought to be able to spend without getting permission from the other one? And I had them write it down so they couldn't change it. And so when they wrote it down, they handed it to me, and I looked at his, and he said $100. And I looked at hers, and it said $750. You think there was some problems there? Absolutely. Why? Well, because they weren't on the same page. And do you think that caused financial distrust? Of course it did. Well, let's talk about rebuilding trust. The unknown that I talked about a while ago becomes the challenge. When I deal with a couple, when there are breaches of trust and when there are trust issues, I work really hard to help them to create tools. Did it die? Well, were you back there waving at me and I didn't see you? That's all right. Are we good? All right. So I work hard with those couples where they are rebuilding trust to help them realize this concept of making the unknown known. And in fact, let me go one step further with you. We come into marriage with all kinds of issues, all kinds of challenges, and oftentimes an individual will come into marriage with insecurity. We are products of our environment, personality type matters, how we were treated growing up matters, birth order matters, circumstances outside family matters, and it's not unusual for a spouse to come into a marriage who has a really difficult time trusting the other. That doesn't worry me too much. When I can help the couple to understand insecurity exists and to put tools in place to deal with it. And while some of these may feel unhealthy and maybe even controlling, you just deal with what it is. If a husband is working late and the wife is worried, he can either resist that because it's not fair and say, I ought not to have to call you when I leave work to let you know I'm coming home. And I agree. I wish he didn't have to do that. Or he can make the unknown known with a simple phone call and say, hey, I'm on my way, and put her mind at ease. And when he gets home, things are much better. Now, I will tell you, I'd rather that there was not that level of insecurity, but if the level is insecurity there, deal with it. Don't fight it. Use tools in place to make the unknown known, because when the unknown continues to fester and fester and fester, our imaginations start running crazy and people become illogical in blaming the other for things that the other one can't even start to understand. And for those of you who've had some trust issues, you're going, yeah, I know, I remember how that works. We start spiraling. Well, working together to rebuild trust is important. Using tools to help to do that is so very important, and being patient, because it does take a long time. Now, I love this part of this session, and I want you to listen close and work on it. I call this just ask. When a husband and wife can have total openness and total transparency, they don't have to wonder anything. They can simply ask. Now, I usually have fun asking this question, and the question is, if you could read your spouse's mind, By turning on a switch, would you? Some of you are going, yeah. Some of you are going, no. Some of you are going, Oh, that's kind of a scary thought, isn't it? Well, you don't have to. If your relationship is completely open and transparent, if you are wondering something, you can simply ask and know the answer, because the two of you have established you will not tell each other anything that's not 100% true. For example, husband and wife are driving down the road. One of them's not saying much. One will say to the other, "Are you mad at me?" The other one will say, "No, I'm not mad at you. Why do you say that?" And the first one says, "Oh, they're mad, I can tell." How ridiculous is that? What that means is words are not trusted. We are giving answers, and then we're having to look past the answer to see what the deal really is. But you're laughing because we do that kind of stuff all the time, don't we? Do you like this outfit? Oh, I love that outfit. I can tell he doesn't like it. Do you realize how painful it is to have a relationship where when we give answers, we can't completely trust, totally and completely, what the answer is, what the response is, and how freeing it is to say, "Are you aggravated at me?" "Yeah, I'm kind of aggravated at you." "Why?" "Well, because you said this." And instead of me guessing, instead of me wondering, I'm able to deal with what the deal really is. It is freeing. And in fact, I've got a couple I saw my next to the last couple Wednesday night that I've seen for the last several months, and they were playing this game big time. And so we put in place with them. In fact, I told them about doing the just ask thing, and they kind of picked up on the 100% term or phrase. And several weeks ago, she would ask him a question, he would answer, and she'd go, 100%? And he'd go, "Yep, 100%. And I've heard both of them do that. In fact, they did that Wednesday night. One of them asked the other one a question, and they said 100%, and the other one said 100%. What are they doing? They're self-checking themselves on this, making sure that every word that comes out of their mouth is totally and completely accurate and honest. Now, guarantee you, a lot of us here need to work on that one, because we get somewhat flippant. So, suggestions to help in accuracy and honesty. And these are just all before you. Number one, think before speaking. And some have grown up learning, instead of answering honestly and accurately, to give the answer that will best go in the direction that they need it to go. You know what I mean by that? You know, you see a lot of people who grow up having no value at all to being truthful and honest. They learn to play the game of, what do I need to say to best help the situation to turn out the way I want to? And a lot of times we have to work really hard to overcome that way. Number three, when we speak, do others immediately begin reading between the lines and determining what the situation really is? And oh, how we need to be careful with technology. The ability to communicate is way bigger than ever before. And I love technology. My last full-time position at Freed Hardeman put me in charge of all of IT at Freed Hardeman. It's the favorite job I've ever had. I had a great IT staff, and I love technology. But I want to tell you something, technology gets more couples in trouble than just about anything. The internet's one of Satan's strongest tools, and how important it is to use accountability tools. And we could talk about this. And what about Facebook? Now, I have a Facebook account. If you send me next week a friend request on Facebook, first thing you'll see is I don't have a picture there. Second thing you'll see is I'm not going to accept you as my friend. It's not because I don't want to be your friend. It's because I hear the word Facebook in the counseling room so often, it is such a big negative to me. Now, I'll have to admit, in the last few months, I've kind of gotten into Facebook because of an old boat that I'm redoing, and there's a Facebook page for it, and I've kind of got sucked into it. And Tina catches me on Facebook looking up speckled trout fishing and Dolphin Island fishing and how to rebuild stouter built boats. And even with that though, I can tell you how that just so sucks you right in. How it will. Oh, how we have to be careful. I had a counseling appointment with a couple in there. He was 67 years old. And they came to see me because he had had an affair with his high school girlfriend that he had not seen in almost 50 years. She lived in California. He lived in Tennessee. He found her on Facebook. They started talking. They started talking often. He planned one of his business trips to go to a place close to her where they could see each other for the first time, and it kept going and kept going. Now, that's just crazy how easy it is for Satan to use technology to slip up on each other. If you have a Facebook account, and most of you do, or other social media accounts, be completely open and transparent. I love seeing a Facebook account that has a husband and wife's name on that account, where both of them have access to it, and that way either of them can see everything that's there. Just be careful with it. Trust is one of life's most treasured and taken for granted blessings. Once it's gone, it is so very hard to get back. So, questions, comments on the trust, openness, transparency thing?
Just a comment on the just ask. Don't ask loaded questions. Like, does this dress make my behind look bigger?
Yeah, I ask Tina that all the time.
Be careful what you ask.
Yeah, sure. Be careful what you ask. And an appropriate way to respond to some of those is, are you sure you want me to answer that? I'm being serious. There are times that Tina will say, do you really want to know? And what she's saying is, you may not like my answer, but you know what I love? I love the fact that even though I don't like her answer, I know that she's truthful with me. And her not being truthful with me is way, way worse than telling me something that may be hard for me to hear. But yeah, be careful about the questions. What else?
Well, I was just, my mind was exactly what Kathy was alluding to, is sometimes you have to be careful when you ask the questions and make sure you're ready for the answer.
Yeah, sure. All of these are sensitive areas, but I'm going to come back to what I keep coming back to. It is absolutely freeing and valuable beyond what we can imagine when we can know that every word coming out of our spouse's mouth is 100% the case. We can deal with the difficult answers. We can deal with all of the hard parts of this way easier than I'm not sure I can trust what he or she says. It's just huge.
I've done some counseling. I'm not anywhere near the league you were in, not professional at all. But I've caught myself telling couples, well, forgiveness and trust are not the same things. And there's a sense I believe that, but there's also a sense that the scriptures challenge my belief on that. Because I think about Jesus being betrayed by all of his apostles. All of them left him. And yet he forgave gave him and trusted him with his mission. And I'm challenged to believe that forgiveness includes the requirement that I need to put my heart back out there and let it be exposed again. That's part of forgiveness, is the willingness to trust again.
Yeah, what you're talking about is tricky.
I understand that.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to be honest with.
Yeah, sure. No, I appreciate the comment a lot. And here's how I'll respond to that. You can use as a license, my feelings are real, it'll eventually come, I don't have to try, to not push your heart to where it needs to be. And I don't want to go too far at all. I don't want to go in that direction at all. The thing I want to guard against is having a spouse feel guilty because enough time has not passed for that trust to be regained. That makes sense? And trust cannot just suddenly be replaced by trying harder. It has to be earned. And I would even say Jesus had the ability to know the unknown where I don't. You know, he had the ability to know the hearts and the intents of mankind, and when they were sorry, way more than I do. Sometimes I have to have that trust shown to me so that I can accept it. But I agree completely that I don't want to give somebody the right to hold something over their head and on and on and on and on kind of stuff. That makes sense?
Would it be fair to say that trust is long and emotional state that has to at some point be turned to a conscious choice?
We're getting deep, aren't we? Emotion is very much a part of trust. Information, knowledge is also a part of trust. And I think it's a blending of that. You know, the mind is complex. And I talked a while ago about spiraling. If trust has been breached, the innocent spouse in that situation always, early on, has a problem with the imagination running wild. And the reason that is what it is a line I use every day that is so very true, and that is, it's impossible to be logical with an emotional person. You know, my favorite way of illustrating that is the coach who calls the timeout with 2 seconds left to go in the game, and the one kid who's been given cheap shots the whole game on the basketball court, and they're up 1 point, and finally the kid takes all he can take, and he turns around and he sucker punches the kid who'd been feeding him elbows the whole game, and the ref hadn't seen it. And the coach calls timeout and pulls the kid over to the huddle, grabs him by his jersey, and he says, what were you thinking? And I want to go, what in the world did thinking have to do with any of that? It was not all right, let me see the pluses and minuses of if I jack this guy and determine whether it's a good idea. But that's the way the coach is dealing with it, right? No, it was emotional. It was reflex. It was impulsive. It was, I can't control it anymore. That's the same thing that happens when trust has been breached and emotions kick in and spiraling starts happening. And when that happens, person will blame the other for stuff that's completely off the wall, and the other one is going, this is crazy. It doesn't make sense. I can't believe you would think that. Why? Because emotions are so rampant. And continuing to work, continuing to make the unknown known, continuing to deal with that emotional side makes the emotion go down, and the trust and the knowledge and the logic over time go up. But there's some time that has to take place in order for that process to happen. I guess the best way I'd say it. All right, well, let's move on, and we'll have more time later. Quentin, are we ready? You got the next one ready for me? Quentin's good. Y'all are lucky to have him. We're scaring him to death. He's never going to want to get married, right? All right.
I'll get it eventually.
You're good. Are you getting tired? You want to stand up, take a break? You want to stand up for a second? Are we ready? All right. All right, so accepting differences. And this is a fun one for me. And it's one that I think is helpful if we'll look at closely. And I love this line. If you married someone just like yourself, then one of you is unnecessary. Men and women are truly created to be different. And this involves a story of two good friends of ours, Mike and Nancy. In fact, Mike also teaches at Harding. Mike and Nancy are close friends of ours, and we were talking about marriage one day, and he said, you know what the first argument we had was after we got married? And I said, no, what was it? He said, it was on the morning after our wedding night when we were on our way to our honeymoon location. And I said, what happened? And he said, I was driving down the road, just enjoying the feeling of being married. And Nancy looks over and she said, what are you thinking? And he said, oh, I'm not thinking anything. And she said, no, really, what are you thinking? He said, well, I really wasn't thinking anything. She said, yes, you are. What are you thinking? If your eyes are open, you're thinking. And he said, no, I was just kind of enjoying bliss. And she said, what are you hiding from me? And he said, I'm not hiding anything from you. Now, if you knew the two of them, right? If you knew the two of them, you would completely understand this, because he is the most laid back, easygoing, will live to be 130 person you've ever seen. She, on the other hand, is a little bit uptight, is always, scurrying around, never late, always has her ducks in a row. He can be a little aggravating in that way. And the two of them are very different. But on day one, they were having a hard time understanding those differences. Well, let's play this one. And in fact, let me tell you, this one is kind of gets on my nerves a little bit because it's just loud and obnoxious, but it makes the point really well.
We're going to start discussing men's brains, women's brains, and how they're very different from each other. Now, I want to start with men's brains. All right? Now, men's brains are very unique. Men's brains are made up of little boxes. And we have a box for everything. We've got a box for the car. We've got a box for the money. We've got a box for the job. We've got a box for you. We've got a box for the kids. We've got a box for your mother somewhere in the basement. We got boxes everywhere. And the rule is the boxes don't touch. When a man discusses a particular subject, we go to that particular box, we pull that box out, we open the box, we discuss only what is in that box. All right? And then we close the box and put it away, being very, very careful not to touch any other boxes. Now, women's brains are very, very different from men's brains. Women's brains are made up of a big ball of wire. And everything is connected to everything. The money's connected to the car, and the car's connected to your job, and your kids are connected to your mother, and everything's connected to everything. And it's like... It's like the internet superhighway, okay? And it's all driven by energy that we call emotion. And it's just... It's one of the reasons why women tend to remember everything. Because if you take an event and you connect it to an emotion, it burns in your memory and you can remember it forever. The same thing happens for men. It just doesn't happen very often because, quite frankly, we don't care. Women tend to care about everything. And she just loves it. We're going to start discussing men's brains.
And as we were talking a while ago, Chris, sometimes genders are reversed a little bit, but there's one part of this that's pretty common, I think, and that is that women have some instinct that men do not have, I believe, due to maternal instinct. And whether men tend to be the more emotional than the women or not, almost always women, for example, multitask way better than men. And it's my theory, it is my theory that a lot of that has to do with maternal instinct. Why? Because if we put the baby down, we might forget where we put it while we are thinking about something else. Now, that's probably a little bit of an overreaction, but my point is there are differences. And look at this verse from Peter 3 and verse 7. Husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives. Treat them with respect as the weaker vessel or weaker partner, and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. Now, I don't use this verse to point out the fact that Peter said women are weaker, and my interpretation of this passage is that generally men are physically stronger than women. I think that's all it's meant there. If we try to read more into it, I think we're reading too much into it. Notice also the equality in heirs of eternal salvation. Notice also that husbands, if we don't treat our wives with respect and appropriately, it gets in the way of our prayer lives. But Peter said there are differences between husbands and wives. Now, this is Carter and Haley, our son and daughter. Now, if you look at Haley, look at her face, her response. Tina didn't know that I had this in here. And you look at Carter, you might be able to see that the two of them are a little different. Carter is serious, he is analytical, he is exact, and, well, Haley is Haley. So Carter and Haley were both home from college one weekend one of those rare weekends that we had the whole family back together. We left Henderson when Carter went to Freed-Hardeman and moved to Columbia, and so Carter graduated from high school and his family left. And so it was easy when Haley, a couple of years later, graduated from high school, for them to go home to Henderson and just stay there. And we didn't get them home very much. Why? That was home to them. Where we lived was not their home. And it was one of those special weekends where both of them came home, and Tina was going to fix their special meal, their favorite meal, favorite food, his and hers. And when they finally got to the house on Friday night late, we were all sitting around in the living room, and Mom says, all right, you all sleep as late as you want to. You go see whomever you want to see, friends tomorrow, shop, do whatever you want to. But I want everybody at the table at 6 o'clock. No phones, at the table at 6 o'clock. I'm going to fix what you want, and I'm going to fix what you want. And so we all looked at Haley, and one of us said to Haley, Haley, 6 o'clock. Do you understand? Of course, of course. So the day takes place Saturday night, 6 o'clock comes, Carter is to my left, I'm at the head of the table where the patriarch always sits, right? Haley's chair beside me is empty, and Tina is in her chair. And so we're kind of sitting there rolling our eyes, not saying anything, looking at our watches. Carter starts beating on the table, thumping on the table. 6:01, 6:02, 6:03, 6:04. Finally, at 6:05, Haley comes busting up the steps. The door flies open. She comes. Before she sits down, she hugs Mom, and she says, oh, this looks so great. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And she sits down, and Carter says, you're late. And she looked at her watch, and she said, what do you mean I'm late? We're supposed to be here at 6 o'clock. And he went, 6:05 is not 6 o'clock. And Haley looked at me and said, what's his problem? And Carter went, what's my problem? And then Haley said, why is he ruining this for everybody? Now, who was right? It depends if you think like Carter or if you think like Haley. Because if you're black and white, architectural, accounting, engineer, and somebody tries to argue with you that 6:05 is not late when you were supposed to be there at 6 o'clock, you think they are insane. But if you're somebody who's touchy-feely and you think, you're right, he was making a big deal out of nothing. Why ruin that for everybody? If you tend to be like Haley, then you are going to tend to think she was more right, and it's hard to argue with her. Now, I'll jump ahead in my slide, but I'll go ahead and make the point because it works very well right now. I am an if-then thinker. I am like Carter. I am one who, if I have a problem, can take a legal pad and I can make a list of pluses and minuses, and I can get to the bottom line and come up with the right answer, usually, and do a pretty good job of it. Why? Because I'm logical in the way I lay things out and attack problems. How many of you are like that? Way more men, not surprised. But watch this. What happens when a logical thinker differs with somebody who's not so black and white, concrete, logical, if-then in their thinking? For those of us who are that kind of thinker, when we have gone through the process and we get to the bottom line, any answer other than the one we get is wrong. Why? Because nothing trumps logic. Do you see what I'm saying? So what happens when the if-then thinker is differing with the touchy-feely thinker? 99 times out of 100, the touchy-feely thinker leaves being hurt, feeling disrespected, feeling like their opinion doesn't matter. Why? Because you cannot argue with logic. Now, big red flag here. If you're like me, realize right now that there is something way more important than whether or not you are right. And that's not meant to be said for humor. And watch this as we develop it. Life is way better when we accept the fact that not everybody has to be like me. Understanding that people are different is necessary for good relationships. Individuals have different personalities, emotions, logical and mental processes, levels of introversion, extroversion, means of communicating, ways of understanding, and needs. And boom, it is a matter of respect. If we're driving down the road and we see a house that's painted a strange color, and one of us says, "Can you believe they painted that house that color?" And the other one says, "I know, I don't know why everybody's house doesn't look just like ours." You see how ridiculous that is? But so many times without us understanding what we're doing, we're thinking, "Oh, yuck, can you believe?" Oh, okay, so everybody has to think just like me. Well, when we put it that way, we realize how ridiculous it is. And if I get to the bottom line and Tina doesn't see it that way, and I belittle her even without meaning to, because her answer is not logical, then she's going to walk away feeling like I look down on her, I belittle her, I made fun of her, I think my thinking is better than her. And especially men, I'll tell you, be careful, because more of us tend to fall in that category. And you remember last night when I said wives and husbands, but I was thinking especially wives, if you feel like your husband is being disrespectful to you in this way, I want you to carefully and lovingly say, "I feel disrespected." And spouses, if our spouse says that to us, I want us to remember that we're not always right, and even when I'm right, my spouse matters to me more than whether or not I'm right or wrong. Why? It's immature thinking to think that everybody ought to be like me. And what are common areas where these differences exist? Personality, spiritual. We talked about being on different lengths, different wavelengths or different places spiritually. If your spouse is the spiritual leader in the family and it's clear and obvious, then you automatically feel less than when compared to them in terms of faith areas. Sexual differences. I'd like to stop and talk about the background and family issues. We mentioned this before. We've talked about financial issues and how husbands and wives process information. Part of this personality thing has so much to do with these differences and these logical if-then thinkers. And let me talk about this one for a minute. Careers play into this. And especially when we advance in our careers to the place where we are managers or we are decision makers. We may have a position at work where we have people all day coming to us for answers or decisions because we are good at if-then thinking, and we have gotten to that point. And oh, how hard it is to flip that switch and turn that off when we go home. But if we don't do that, we go home and we still think we are better at decision making and our opinion matters more and trumps everybody else, and our spouse feels less than or belittled or not equal in the process. Now, let me talk about the respect thing real quickly and how easy it is to do this subtly. We're Braves fans. Some of us were talking about that. I've been a Braves fan all my life. Remind everybody that they won the World Series this year. Oh, sorry. Carter and I were watching a game one Sunday afternoon several years ago when he was in college, and Tina, who loves sports and knows way more about sports than a lot of men I know, came through the house, and Carter said, "Dad, he balked. Pitcher balked." And Mom heard that and said something like, "No, that was a strike." And what she was saying was she thought Carter had said pitcher threw a ball, but he was saying pitcher made an illegal move toward first base. And when Mom said that's a strike, Carter looked at me and rolled his eyes a little, and I looked back at him and kind of went. And that was all it took to tell Mom we thought we were better than her. Now, was our son trying to make fun of his mom? No, he's very respectful. It's not who he is. Was I trying to be disrespectful to Tina? No, I don't ever want to hurt her. It was that easy for her to walk out of that room feeling like her son and her husband had made fun of her. It's kind of scary, isn't it? That's why, again, on last night, I said, when you feel that way, let each other know. If I cause Tina to feel disrespected by some nonverbal or some verbal, I want her to tell me. Why? I don't want to hurt her. I don't want to be disrespectful to her. And so many things play into how easy it is for us to come in and let our guards down and not be respectful. I had a couple in a counseling office a few months ago. She's a nurse, and he is adamantly opposed to getting the vaccination. And, boy, it was a big deal to him. You know, he's strong in that don't vaccinate side. And I could tell that he was forcing the way he felt about that on her. And she was kind of timidly going along with it and saying, "Oh, yeah, we don't get vaccinations." And I asked him, I said, "I got a question for you." I said, "If she differs with you on this, are you okay with her getting a vaccination?" Ooh, boy, that was a big time, dangerous question. But he realized how bad he would look if he said no. And he said, "No, she wants to get one, that's fine." And she looked at him and her eyes popped up wide and she went, "Seriously?" Well, I know that to this day she did not get vaccinated and they've had COVID and did okay with it. It's not about COVID. It's about him not forcing how he felt on her. Now, I'm perfectly fine with them talking about it. I'm perfectly fine with them dealing with their differences in appropriate ways. But it's not respectful when we think everybody ought to be just like me. And how we communicate these differences and when we communicate is important. You don't talk about them at the wrong time. Sexual differences, I've referred to that briefly. You need to talk. You need to ask each other, how was it? Is there something I could have done that would have been more meaningful, that you would have appreciated more? And I tell you, it's the hardest conversation in the world to have. But if we don't have those conversations, we don't understand our differences and what is needed. So what is the goal in dealing with differences? The goal is to be okay with my spouse seeing something differently from me without automatically thinking he or she is wrong, my way is better, he or she should see it like I do, and I'll not be content until he or she gets to that point. Remember, it's a matter of respect. I don't care what we differ over. Tina is more important to me than me proving anything that she differs on to her. We've heard for years the phrase agree to disagree. I'm not saying compromise, especially convictions, but I'm saying don't handle them in a disrespectful, I am better than you way. Now, I want, in fact, I thought a few minutes ago, we've got an exercise here, and I'm going to encourage you to do that later. But what I want you to do in this exercise number 3 is to take a few minutes with each other and sit down and talk about what are our differences. How do we process differently? Do our differences create times in which either of us feels disrespectful? You'll see the purpose of that, and hopefully it'll be meaningful. All right, so you all have the tired look, especially Tina, bless her heart, as though she's never heard this stuff before, most of it. So why don't we take a 5-minute break, and then we'll do this last one real quick before lunch, and then we'll have a good lunch break. Is that good? All right, so take 5 minutes, and I'm going to start in 5 minutes. If you're not back, I'll understand. So.
Raised me, we used to say that men get the track, men give love to give sex, and women give sex to give love.
Yeah. Yeah. It's completely different. And logic is really strong because there is
March for us.
I'm sure the answer to that is yes. And I'll just need to look and see what's available. I'll make sure that I've got a slide everything that's got my contact information. So
I'll share it.
Yeah, sure.
One of the other elders, I think had a family emergency, so I was texting him, I said, I was going to ask you if you had availability for okay, great.
I love coming this way.
Yeah, and you can fly straight tonight. No, anyway, we'll work on it.
Say it again. Oh, yeah. So I have a counseling center at West Side. I am a family minister, but and so have some other roles. Counseling for West Side and the community. we decided that God was leading us to go to the young academy. That job was so time-consuming, we agreed that we would tell everybody we test. And so while I was president of the academy, I actually ran some of these seminars away from Columbia, but we didn't have time to tell everybody that when I resigned, we decided and I said, it's needed. You know, reach has to be different today than 30 years ago. You know, door knocking doesn't work much anymore. They know they have heating we did so we Okay, are we ready? Did I? Yeah, I did. Yeah, What are you eating? Peanuts? All right, are you holding up okay? You doing all right?
It's funny, I thought 12:30, I thought, when is he breaking for lunch? So we're an hour.
Yeah, our clocks are off. All right, we got 2 more sessions. We got one before lunch and then only one after lunch. So you'll only have one session that you've got to fight going to sleep on with the after lunch stuff that always happens. So we're going to talk about how do we argue? How do we have conflict? How do we deal with when we get to the point that we're irritated with each other? Now, if you can read that, look closely. That's kind of funny. This came out in the Columbia Daily Herald several years ago. And if you read it, if not, you'll see that this man in Kansas City went in and robbed a bank. After he robbed the bank, he took the bag of money. He went over into the waiting area at the bank, sat down and waited for the police to come in and arrest him. And when the police came in to arrest him, they said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm so tired of fighting with my wife that I told her I would rather live in jail than with her." And so he went and robbed a bank in order that he would get his wish. And I would suggest to you there are better ways to handle conflict. And so let's look at this one. This one is our kids would enjoy, but it makes the point pretty well. Happens, isn't it? Yeah, when we don't handle things well, how it could go versus how it goes, and who oftentimes pays for it? The little ones,
For
right?
that reason, it says the Bible, submit each other.
Yeah.
And sometimes you need to get down, live past the other one, and then in another way is the.
So this is not much of the submission look, is it?
I mean, sometimes we are in that way.
Yeah, that's right. We are. Ephesians 4:26, do not let the sun go down upon your wrath while you're still angry. Do not get the devil a foothold. You know what a foothold is? When you were wrestling with kids, do you ever grab the ankle of the other one and they couldn't get away unless they kick you really, really hard? Because you've got that foothold. We give Satan a foothold when we allow our anger to go on and on and on. However, I will suggest to you that seeing things differently, even having conflict that we handle appropriately, can make us better. As iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. There's no such thing as a marriage without conflict, without differences. One of the things I ask couples when I do premarital counseling is, so how do your fights go? When you argue, what does that look like? And if they tell me, well, we never really had an argument, I tell them they're not ready to get married yet because they have not been around each other enough to get to the point that they let their guards down. And when that happens, sometimes people are very different. And personality matters. Some people by nature and some people by nurture are conflict avoiders. It's very common for me to see an adult who will say something like, I grew up in a house that had so much conflict, I run from conflict, I shut down, I will not argue, I turn the other way. And when the other spouse is one who needs to talk things out, that oftentimes causes problems. Not at all unusual. And sometimes by nature or nurture, people are fighters by nature. Tina and I, several years ago, worked with a couple who took great pride in their ability to cuss each other. They truly did. They would cut each other to shreds using language that I wouldn't repeat here for anything. And then they'd look at each other and laugh just as though they were proud of the other one for being so, whatever you call that. Well, you have different types of people who come into marriage in terms of how they handle conflict. Conflict is often the result of small things that become large because of all the baggage that has built up, as we have talked about. And that generally results from emotion, from stress, from things that build up over time, from selfishness, from coexisting, from poor relationships, to the point that we are looking for things. We are just waiting for the next mistake or the next thing that's said wrong. And I want you to think about this question. Why do we sometimes and why do we often treat perfect strangers way better than the people that we love the most? Have you ever thought about that? We'll be in a bad mood all the way from the house to the church building on Sunday morning and say junk, but we open the door and get out of the parking lot and we put on our church face. And Sister so-and-so comes up, "Hi, how are you doing?" Or a visitor that we don't even know. "Wow, it's so good to have you here." But yet, before we opened that door in the house, we were being hurtful to each other. I'll sometimes in the counseling room ask a couple, "Would you take a bullet for her? Would you take a bullet for him?" I've had people say no. But usually couples kind of get the junk out of the way and they get into how they really feel for their spouse, and they'll go, "Yeah, I would." And they mean it. And then I'll say, "Isn't it a little bit inconsistent that you can sit right here and say something that would hurt her, that would hurt the person you love the most, like you just did? But yet if I were to attempt to shoot her, you'd step in front and take that bullet for her?" Well, we let down our guards to the point that sometimes we need to stop and be reminded that the person, as we said last time, is more important than the difference. And when frustration and resentment builds, when conflict, when arguments get to be more than they should be, then little things become exaggerated. We have a knockdown drag out because the paper towel roll was put in the wrong place on the counter. Or we have a knockdown drag out because you were late coming home, or because that's not what I wanted to eat, or I can't believe you said that to little Johnny, or whatever. And as we've said, those piles of mud start building up and we start grabbing and slinging. Well, when we are getting into it, there's some things that just do not work. And we'll identify ourselves probably in some of these because we have these tendencies. The first one is denial. If my spouse is getting on to me for something, is criticizing me for something, my gut reaction is to deny that, to protect my turf. "No, I don't do that," or "I didn't do that," or "you misunderstood that." If the first word out of my mouth is no, then I need to slow down and back up and see if there's any merit to what's being said. Second thing we need to be careful not to do is downplay it. If it's a big deal to my spouse, whether it's a big deal to me or not, then I need to deal with it as a big deal. Why? Well, we heard the term a long time ago, and I use it with couples. Tell your spouse, "Well, that's the way I feel, and my feelings are real." And if a spouse feels that way, whether they ought to feel that way or not, they've got a situation that has to be dealt with. Now, I'll even admit that sometimes feelings are not where they ought to be. But if a person feels that way, we've got to deal with it appropriately. Number 3, when we exaggerate for the purpose of trying to win our argument or stake out our territory, all we're doing is trying to grab bigger hands full of mud. What about nagging? Do we tend to be critical? Do we tend to find the negative? Do we do a much better job of telling our spouse when they do something wrong than when they do something right? Again, personality matters. Sometimes this is just how we were raised, or who we are, or how we analyze things. But a really good question is to our spouse, do you see me as more negative toward you than positive? And bringing up the past. What happens when we start getting into it? When the mud starts flinging, then we want to win that battle, and we will go as far back as we need to find something to blame the other one with. And what good is that? What purpose is that? Is that so that we can resolve our difference? No. At that point, it is trying to win. And when we try to win, we wind up hurting each other. Love keeps no record of wrong.
Even we record the bad situation before, if we didn't speak very well about that problem before, and you are recording all the time. For that reason, when that is my advice. And sometimes we discuss about the problem, and sometimes we just try to avoid and forget the problem, but it's not agreement. When there is not agreement, or we are not trying to find the solution for that problem, or what was the problem between he and me, you are recording after. With another trouble. Ah, do you remember that day? Yes.
Yeah, so here's kind of my rule for dealing with kind of situation you talked about. What happens, first of all, when we avoid problems that are bothering us? Builds up and builds up and builds up until we explode, right? It's like trying to put too much air in a bicycle tube. If you keep trying to cram it in there, eventually it's not going to take you more and it's going to explode. However, the other end of that extreme is also the case. If every time something bothers me, I'm pointing it out to my spouse, then I become just a nagger and a nitpicker. I'm just constantly critical. So what's the rule? Here's my rule. My rule is if something happens that's bothering me, I try to turn it. If I can turn it and let it go without it building up and building up and building up, then I turn it, and that keeps me from constantly nagging and criticizing. If I try to turn it and it continues to bother me to the point that it's building, then I need to go to my spouse and say, look, there's something here that's working on me, and we need to talk about it. That make sense? All right, well, let's keep going. First of all, deal with disappointments, deal with conflict as soon as possible. I believe Ephesians 4:26 is a concept that's not totally and completely literal. And by that, what I mean is this. I have seen couples who say, we never went to bed mad. Yes, they did. They just never went to bed without finally getting to a place that they called it quits. We all know what it's like to try to settle something when we are angrier than we ought to be. And sometimes the best thing we can do is step away from it and catch our breath and maybe even sleep on it. Now, I'm not arguing with Paul. He has the advantage way over me. But I believe this concept is don't let something go on and on and on, not necessarily that you are sinning if you wait until the morning to discuss something. Can't tell you how many times I've had couples come in, I'll say, how was your week? Or how were the last couple of weeks? And one of them would say, we did really well except for Thursday night of last week. And I'll say, what happened Thursday night of last week? And they'll go, I don't even remember. All they remember is they got into it over something small. It was such a big deal, it was not even worth their remembering. And sometimes when we give ourselves the opportunity to breathe and give ourselves some space, then those things just are no longer big deals anymore. Suggestion number 2, be specific. Deal specifically with what the issue is. Don't generalize. And here's the perfect example. Wife works outside the home, comes in, feels like she's doing all the work at home, getting meals ready, and garbage is to the top and running over, and he comes through, steps over it, and she says to him, you never take out the trash. There's one word in that sentence that grabs his attention, and he says, or he thinks, never. All I have to do is find one time in the last 40 years that I took out the trash and I win. I took out the trash 3 weeks ago. See, her point was not, you never have ever taken out the trash. Her point was, I really need more help. But because she communicated it in the way she did, her intention became completely sidetracked. And all he had to do is come up with one exception to her rule, and he blew her out of the water, and he walks off going, I won that one. Isn't that how we do it? When we hear the words never or always? Absolutely. Why? Because that's the way we are geared. And so be careful about using these exaggerated words and being specific with exactly what we need. I really need more help is way easier to communicate than you never do whatever. Number 3, consider writing your thoughts down. Now, I'll say this one primarily to the women because I see or I hear women way more often than not saying to me, he just won't listen to me. And what I often will tell them to do is, all right, stop, take time, write down your thoughts. Write down what's bothering you, what's working on you. Be careful, write it carefully. Don't make charges, don't make accusations, don't use exaggerations. And then sit it down, get away from it for a couple of hours, come back and read it. And if it says what you want it to say and you are giving your thoughts, then find the right time and give it to him and then walk away from him and let him read it. There's several things that go in there. First of all, you've had the opportunity to re-look at what you're wanting to say to make sure it's worded well. And when we in frustration just start throwing words out that are emotionally charged, they oftentimes don't come out the way we intend for them to. And so we have the opportunity to review. Secondly, he has to read from line 1 to the last line without having the opportunity to interrupt and to cut you off. And you get the opportunity to completely say everything you want to say with him reading through the whole thing before he responds to any of it. Number 3, if you are not accustomed to doing this and you give something in writing to him, his first thought probably is going to be, this must be a big deal for her to take the time to stop and write all this down. And then, after he has read it, he has the opportunity to think about it. Now, whether or not he runs right then and starts defending himself, he may do that, but you've given your best shot in conveying your thoughts and concerns to him. Number 4, be willing to admit and say, I'm sorry. It is a hard thing to do to hear somebody find fault with us or criticize us and stop and ask the question, are they right? But oh, how we need to do that and admit it when they are.
And when you say, I'm sorry, don't say, I'm sorry, but.
Yeah.
Is that just?
Yes. Yes. I'm laughing because the couple I told you about a while ago, the last couple Wednesday night, I had to do that. He kept saying, I'm sorry, but, and I said, you realize when you're using the word but, you're completely erasing the apology, aren't you? Well, yes, but, and we just started laughing.
Also, I work with people a lot, and one thing I hear a ton and just irks me is people will say, I'm sorry you feel that way.
Yeah.
That's not an apology.
Yeah, it hurts, doesn't it? Yeah, it's like, I'm sorry you feel that way, but you're really stupid.
Yeah.
Is the way that feels, isn't it?
You need to say sorry for your part.
Yeah. Yeah, own it and leave it at that. And then leave it up to them to deal with it. Yeah, good point. Number 5, confront privately. Don't confront in front of children, in front of others. Why? It's just not the right thing to do. Number 6, try to understand the other person's point of view. Number 7, learn to compromise. Now, this one is huge. And I want to take just a minute to try to explain it. When couples are not trying to hurt each other and are trying to be considerate, they still will differ. When they differ, they will have different levels of how important this is to me. If a wife is wanting to do something and it's a really big deal to her, and a husband is wanting to do something that will not allow what she wants, but it's not as big a deal, then it makes sense for them to talk about it to the point that he concedes to her because he can tell it's a big deal. If it's the other way, the same is true. But what happens when they are differing on something that is in complete conflict with each other and it's a big deal to both of them? there are two things they can do. They can keep beating on each other until the stronger wins and gets his or her way, and the other one walks away feeling hurt, unappreciated, and disrespected. Or when the two realize we are at two very different places and neither of us can completely get what we want without the other one being hurt, then you automatically start looking for the middle ground. What is the compromise? What can I live with that you can live with? Most people don't do that. Most people keep tugging it out until the stronger one wins and the weaker one in the conflict winds up going away feeling hurt. This may be how we're going to spend days off. It may be where we want to go. It might even be what we're going to do or where we're going to go eat. And while hopefully those are not at this level, the key is before we get to the place that we are hurting each other, we stop and figure out how we both can do the give and take thing. If you are arguing over differences and people get hurt, you're not doing this. And sometimes the compromise may be this time what you want to do, next time what I want to do. But the key to it is realizing you are more important to me than any difference we could have that would result in us hurting each other. Some of us can say we've hurt each other way too much in the past, and we don't want to do that anymore. And we have to do things differently. Compromise is such a big part of this. When not hurting my spouse becomes more important to me than winning an argument or getting my way, then conflict is handled in a way where no one may get their way, but no one gets hurt, which is far more important. It is sad to me that we hurt the people we love the most because we allow ourselves to become that emotional. So, questions, comments, anything before we stop for lunch?
The only thing about the disagreement, you know how I feel about with children, if they never see parents disagree, I don't mean fighting, but disagree, then I feel like the kids will think they never had disagreements and they won't know how to deal with it when they had disagreements with people. And so I do think it's healthy for children to see disagreements and then watch from start to finish and how they deal with it.
Yep.
And even if they don't agree in the same way, they compromise and they see that, so they'll know how to fight fair, as you might call it.
Yeah.
They'll know how to handle that.
A lot of people, a lot of my generation's parents didn't believe in letting their children see them disagree. And in the process, what they did was teach us, if you disagree, you're wrong. And you're less than if you disagree. And what Tina's saying is, part of teaching our children how to successfully be married is by teaching them how to deal with the hard times as well. You know, something that goes right along with this, I know it's tired, we're tired, but I'll say this. What goes also along with that is a lot of my parents' generation also did not say, I'm sorry. They did not want to show their children that they messed up. But you know what they did in the process? They taught us that we should expect perfection, and if we do anything less than being perfect, then we are not as good as we ought to be. And I may say Sunday in my parenting lessons at one point or another, I may ask parents, when's the last time your kids have heard you say, I'm sorry? And when's the last time you messed up in front of them? Do those two match? We need to be teaching our kids, yeah, we mess up too. We're not perfect, so that we can teach them how to handle it when we make mistakes and when we do things that we're going to do. All right, what else? Now you're going to say, well, don't ask a question. He's going to preach to us if I do. Anything else?
Something you mentioned about just how much do you care about a particular issue? And that's, someone told us years ago that was really helpful for me and by extension us as a young married couple, is on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is this? And I realized that I was
Yeah.
ready to argue about something that was a 2, really.
Yeah.
And once I learned that, it's like, well, this is a 2, well, it's an 8 for her, well, then I don't care.
Yeah.
And that helped a ton, so.
So Juan and Catherine last night said something that was kind of funny to me. They were talking about how Catherine wanted Juan to do something, wanted him to do it so badly, I forget what, and he finally said, all right, I'll do it. She went, oh, no, you don't have to. It's kind of the same thing, isn't it? It's like it becomes more about the battle than it does the issue. And when we realize that, we go, oh, this is crazy. Why is it? Paper towels? What else? All right, let's stop there. So, everybody on their own for lunch, and we are going to come back for the last session at 1:30. So, you got some time to catch your breath.
On conflict, does the toilet paper go over the top or on the back?
Over the top. You got to be able to thump it on the front for it to come off, right? I have tried it both ways. It is obvious that it's easier, takes less effort, left-handed or right-handed. Why would anybody think otherwise?
Just for the sake of those who are visiting in town and unfamiliar, if you want to go to fast food and go through the drive-through, feel free to get your food and bring it back here and eat if you want to. And also, I can tell you that Taco Bell is in-house dining, but Burger King and McDonald's do not. And I'm not sure about Arby's. Arby's is inside dining, so just the fast food places.
And there's a couple of grocery stores, like
What's
Town
that?
and Country, a couple of grocery stores, Town and Country and Rose Hours, have beautiful salad bars.
And they have in-house dining too.
All right, thank you.
That's a commercial cabinet.
In the dark, it seems like a long
It's kind of the same phenomenon as not text messaging. When you have more things to talk about how easy it is to read into.
So does he shed like a rat or?
How well did you do with that?
So there's not a lot of game.
No, but the thing is like the whole way, like sometimes shedding whatever reason, like when you're shedding paper, you lay on the white paper and then just get up and move.
At least it stays there.
Yeah, yeah, it's really easy